Maggie. I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist with degrees in psychology, theology, and marriage and family therapy, a national certification in dialectical behavioral therapy, and a national certification in integrative mental health. In this video, I'm not looking to diagnose anyone. I'm only willing to offer insight into situations like these. Happy Father's Day! Yay! Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, especially my dad and my sons, actually. Okay, so today we are going to respond to a creator whose name is Lucious Aurelian. His channel is called Restitutor Orbis, and he was talking about wizards of the old world. So I thought Father's Day would be a great day to talk about wizards of the old world and to respond to Lucious Aurelian. Let's say hi to some people first. Adric is first. He says it's on. Auntie is in here. Hi with the peace sign. Favorite Auntie. Adrian says, we're in here. Let's go. And don't forget to hit the like button. JB Designs, salute to you as well. This is the best live tribe on YouTube. You may not be aware of that. If you are watching from the clouds right now, please don't be afraid to say hi to everybody. Again, best live tribe on YouTube, and shout out to the replay gang. Yay. Okay, so let's talk about wizards, okay? In a world built on conquest and erasure, that's kind of how our world is, right? Our greatest sages weren't just lost to time. They were rewritten. The wizards of our myths were not men with staffs casting spells for European kings. They were druids, the high scientists, the healers, and the initiates of an ancient order. Centered in Wales and Ireland, their knowledge stretched across the globe. Their stories survive in the foggy legends of Merlin, the dragon of Cymru, and in the echoes of architecture and symbolism of what some call Tartaria. It's not a fairy tale, it's a reckoning. And I'm just going to ask that you guys stay till the end, because at the very end, there's going to be a bonus video to show that they weren't always called druids, depending on where they were in the world. Watch it till the end. Okay, so who were the druids? To understand the truth of these things, we have to strip away fantasy. Druids weren't merely priests. They were lawgivers, they were astronomers, surgeons, herbalists, poets, historians, and initiates of natural law and cosmic cycles. To quote Julius Caesar, and I have in a book his letters, right? Quote, they are concerned with divine matters, conduct public and private sacrifice, and interpret all religious questions. Of course, this is shortly before Julius Caesar decided to kill them all. And those he didn't kill, he sent St. Patrick to do later, because that's what the Romans do. Okay, their authority often exceeded that of the kings. They advised tribal leaders, but they answered only to the sacred rhythm of nature. Their knowledge was oral, coded, and passed only through years and years of rigorous apprenticeship. The going knowledge right now is that it took 27 years of education to be a full druid. No books, no temples, only memory and the stars. Now, of all Celtic lands, or what we call Celtic lands now, because Like I've said before, these people came before the Celts got there. None preserved Druidic legacy more fiercely than Wells. The red dragon, still waving atop Welsh flags today, is no mere mascot. It's the symbol of ancient power, the guardian of sacred land, and a nod to the serpentine wisdom of the Druids. The dragon represents primordial energy, earth forces, knowledge of the ley lines, the energetic grid of the planet. The same symbol appears again in unexpected places like Bhutan in the Himalayas, Tatarstan in Europe, the Jing dynasty of China, Melilla, Spain, Malta, Porto Madrid, Argentina, and Tartaria. Across Eurasia, an erased civilization known today as Tartaria shared startling overlaps with Wells. Look at the flags. Interesting, huh? Don't they look like a mirror image? The architecture was grand, geometric, acoustic, echoing Druidic principles. The flags, dragon emblems. The myths, a fall from natural harmony into conquest. Is this a coincidence or the ghost of a shared system? Again, watch the bonus video at the end, where Wales was one of many global nodes in a larger pre-cataclysmic civilization rooted in resonance, spirit, and sacred architecture. This is where I reference Lucious Aurelian on the Restitutor Orbis channel. His channel deep dives into ancient architecture, epochs and ages, media, and great resets. He recently did a show on Wizards of the Old World. There is a link in the description. He didn't address the connection of the wizards to the Druids or from the Druids to Tartaria. In fact, he referred to the legend of Arthur as a myth. So we're going to set the record straight. The story of Merlin is central to British legend, but the real Merlin was not this court magician or Disney sorcerer that we know of today. His name, Mer de Dwelt, a Druidic prophet of the forest based on a real initiate forced into hiding after witnessing mass death in war. With who? The Romans. The shift matters. It mirrors the fate of all the other Druids, from spiritual elders into enslaved wizards serving the empire. But before we get into that, Lucius brought up King Arthur. So let's talk about King Arthur. Who was he? And yes, Auntie, yay for Welsh. Arthur, in the original Welsh history, is not a king sitting on a throne. He was a military leader, a defender of the indigenous, who were actually brown, not white like that, against Saxon invaders, often connected with the otherworld, giants, monsters, and magical beasts. Seen as a protector of the indigenous British, and that he will return when needed, kind of like King David or a Messiah. He was never a king. He was Dux Bellorum, the leader of battles. But like most things, our history gets taken, right? All right, from the book Historia Brittonum. Arthur fought and won 12 battles against the Saxons. The final, at Mount Badon, was his most famous, where he allegedly killed 960 men by himself in a single charge. Arthur appears in these ancient stories fighting monsters, one called the Cathpolog, which is a giant chaos cat from Anglesey. What's What kind of cat is that in Marvel? That's what it always makes me think of. Somebody will know the name and put it into the chat. The one that swallows universes, right? This is the Kothpolog. All right. He also fights the Black Sow of Cornwall. That was the symbol of like destruction and the plague. He fights giant boars, serpents, and otherworldly beings from Annwn, which is the Welsh otherworld, right? These aren't knightly tales, right? They are shamanic in tone. Arthur is battling cosmic disorder, not human villains. The Flurkin. Thank you, Adrian. The Flurkin. That is the Capolog. All right. So, in stories like Kilwitchinolan from the Mabinogion, Arthur leads a band of semi-divine heroes on impossible quests through Annwn, which is the other world, right? He is a liminal figure, not quite mortal, not quite a god. He's very, very similar to Gilgamesh. This is echoed in The Spoils of Annwn, which is a poem attributed to Taliesin, where Arthur invades the underworld to steal a sacred cauldron. Interesting thing about the cauldron, it won't cook food if you're a coward. So that's kind of fun, right? So Arthur's original Knights of the Round Table were warriors. There was Cai, C-A-I, able to go days without sleep or even breathing if he had to. Bedivere or Bedivere, who was one-handed and kind of supernaturally strong. He was a super strong guy. And then there's Goroi, who is also called Gawalmakai, later called Gawain. I don't know why his name keeps changing. There was Mabon. There were others all linked as like heroes of this round table. They were heroes with like these supernatural or magical traits, a lot like Greek demigods. Arthur's world is filled with druidic figures, codes, and motifs, sacred animals, shape-shifting, initiatory quests, and the underworld journey. His myth is an encoded druidic teaching. This is why we tell stories, right? Preserved in metaphor after the Romans and their church outlawed the real tradition. His enemies aren't just the Saxons or the Romans. They are forces of spiritual disconnection. You see his quote up there. I will defend the helpless and protect all women and be merciful to all men. I will honor my word. Great lessons, right? Now, what is missing from the French Arthur, the English Arthur, the Christian Arthur? The other world never talks about it, right? The cauldron of wisdom was replaced with the Holy Grail. The prophetic madness of Merded was changed into this Disney Merlin. The dragon guardianship of Wales, gone. The shamanic journey of death and rebirth, never talk about. These were stripped to fit Christian chivalry propaganda, turning a mythic Welsh protector into a palatable courtly hero. So let's talk about the fall and enslavement of Druids in the real history. Druidism was not lost. It was hunted. Hunted, okay? To the Romans, Druids were dangerous. The Grail wasn't a thing. It's a different thing than what you think it is. It's actually Anunnaki. That it's called the May, the M-E. Well, we may go over that at some point in time, but to the Romans, Druids were dangerous. They not just as like leaders of the native resistance, but as custodians of the metaphysical system that threatened Rome's domination model. They united tribes across Britain and Gaul, all the indigenous who were being taken over by those Gothic invaders, right? They were resisting Romanization with both spiritual power and military coordination. Julius Caesar encountered them in Gaul and feared their influence. The Druids, this is Julius Caesar again. The Druids are exempt from war. Many young men flock to them for instruction. They discuss the stars and their motion, the size of the world and the lands, the nature of things, and the power of immortal gods. The translation is, they weren't mystics living in huts with pointy hats. They were natural scientists, philosophers, and cultural leaders. They posed a direct threat to Roman imperial culture. We need to go over that, the Anunnaki. We will talk about that. Actually, when we talk about when we go into bloodlines and we talk about globally enslaved people, we will talk about Mesopotamia and the Anunnaki. So let's talk about Ynys Môn, which is Anglesey of North Wales, known as the Island of the Druids. Môn was the central sanctuary of Druidic training. This is why, to this day, it's called Druid Island. The island held groves, sacred stones, and initiatory mystery schools for both men and women. Druids from across Brittany, Ireland, and Scotland came there to be initiated. Rome knew if you take Anglesey and you decapitate the soul of the Welsh indigenous resistance, you can win. So let's talk about the invasion under Claudius and Suetonius Paulinus. Because Rome really wanted it. So this is the Battle of Anglesey. It was led by Gaius Suetonius Paulinus. The Romans launched a full-scale assault to annihilate the Druids. Quote, "On the shore stood the opposing army, dense with arms and men, while between the ranks ran women dressed like furies in funeral black, with disheveled hair, brandishing torches. Druids, lifting their hands to the sky, poured out dreadful prayers. It struck awe into the soldiers and paralyzed them with fear." That is from the Tacitus Annals. What Roman soldiers encountered was not a military army, but a metaphysical wall of resistance. Women invoking the divine feminine as warriors of spirit, Druid priests performing powerful energy rites, an entire culture standing in ritual defiance. They were able to defy for many hundreds of years, but eventually, now, even with Suetonius, he ordered the massacre. He's like, I don't like any of that stuff, kill them all. Men, women, and children were killed without distinction. The sacred groves were cut down, temples were destroyed, and altars soaked in blood. Tacitus said, "A force was next set over the conquered, and the groves dedicated to cruel superstitions were cut down." All right, we are up to AD 61, the Druidic Rebellion. While Suetonius was wiping out the Druids in the north, Boudica, the queen of the Iceni and a Druid-trained woman, led a revolt that nearly destroyed Roman Britain. She sacked Laudanum. She sacked Camulodunum and Verulamium. Though eventually defeated, she embodied the last echo of the Druidic spirit rising through ranks that women led. It was men and women both. Why does that matter? It wasn't just war, it was cultural decapitation. The Romans feared Druidism not for swords, but for ideas. They said non-hierarchical governance. Again, the round table, remember? the connection to nature, the divine feminine in balance with the divine masculine, and sovereignty through sacred law. The wizard genocide was a systematic removal of pre-Christian metaphysics and sovereignty. Unfortunately, that was not the end of the attacks on the Welsh and the Druids, because here comes England. And if you haven't seen my show on St. Patrick, you might want to watch that as well. So, to summarize, as England is coming. Suetonius Paulinus crushes Anglesey, destroys the Druid power structure, and paves the way for a military occupation of Britain. If it's cutting out, I notice my signal's going down. If it starts cutting out, put it in the chat. Let me know. Okay. Rome divides the indigenous, favoring certain tribes, co-opting the nobles, and imposing Roman-style governance. Have we seen this before? I think we've seen this before. Okay, the priest kingship of the Druids, which had bound together the land, the law, and cosmology, was being shattered. Wales is being spiritually broken, but culturally still resistant. Rome never fully integrated it like they did in Gaul. So this is where we steal Arthur. The Norman and the Plantagenet kings, especially Geoffrey of Monmouth in the 12th century, they retell the Arthur story, but turn him into a chivalric Christian king. They strip his Druidic and other worldly connections. They replace Cymric or Welsh symbols with courtly English values like chivalry, the cross, the crown, all of this, right? So the mythic throne of Britain is hijacked. Arthur becomes English, and the rightful Welsh claim to kingship is erased. It's now all a myth, right? Okay, so we are up to the 1200s. Now we're going to talk about Edward the First, right? Longshanks. What a name, right? Longshanks. He invades Wales and defeats Llywelyn ap Gruffudd, which is the last native prince of Wales. Okay, we're in the 1200s, late 1200s, okay? So Edward I invades Wales, defeats the last native prince of Wales. Then they build English castles on sacred Welsh sites, on the Druid ruins, right? Claiming dominion over Welsh royal lands. The country, which has the most castles per square mile, is Wales. Wales in itself has 600 castles, little tiny Wales. So those studying the previous civilization's architecture might want to take a look at Wales, okay? Because when Edward I came in and usurped that throne, he forced the Welsh to make all these castles for their nobles. Edward I named his son the Prince of Wales, a title reserved for native Welsh heirs. It wasn't an honorific, it was usurpation. It was mocking. We've conquered the country, now we conquer the soul, right? So, Henry VII onward. Henry VII had a little bit of Welsh descent, so they use it to legitimize their claim to the throne of Britain. The Tudor rose merges York and Lancaster, but also metaphorically merges England and Wales under one crown, even though it was usurped, right? Wales still doesn't have autonomy to this day, guys. Henry VIII later formalizes the union through the Laws in Wales Act. That's 1536 and 1543, making Wales part of England by law. It's ours, okay? The usurpation was finalized. Auntie says Henry I wasn't happy if he wasn't killing or screwing someone, or both at the same time. So the bloodline of Welsh royal sovereignty was absorbed, like the English monarchy now is Welsh royalty, killing off any political return of native Cymric kingship. Cymru, by the way, is Wales. So then they go about suppressing the dragon. The red dragon, the symbol of Welsh resistance and spiritual sovereignty, is pushed aside. The lion and the unicorn take center stage in the British coat of arms, if you can believe it. The dragon, though, remained a national symbol. Once the Druids fell, Rome filled the void with soldiers, governors, temples to Mars and to Jupiter, and eventually Christian churches. The Romans massacred entire Druid classes. So as an example, the Anglesey massacre of 60 of the Common Era. The church rebranded Druid sites as Christian holy places. It's ours the whole time. The mystics were forced into monasteries or made to serve kings as seers. They were enslaved. So when you see these English stories of kings who have wizards, like King Arthur had Merlin, they are talking about people who were enslaved and forced to do the bidding of the monarchy. A sacred system of wisdom was made into a parlor trick, its deepest truths buried under centuries of empire and faith. The wizard with the pointy hat was once a Druid philosopher, a metaphysician who mapped the heavens by memory, healed with plants, and spoke in riddles to preserve the truth. The red dragon never died, though. We got it back on the flag. It just went underground. It's rising. In whispers, in dreams, in people who feel the pull of ancient ways. The resonance technology, the sacred geometry, the ancestral memory of the Druidic sages is reawakening. I see it all over the internet, not just in books, but in our bones. When we speak of dragons, we are speaking of the serpentine codes of Earth's wisdom, guarded by those who never forgot. The real wizards of the old world were guardians of the earth, not servants for kings. They wore robes not for show, but for sacred rites. They bowed not to thrones, but to the stars. They were druids. They're actually not gone, much like the forgotten magi of Africa who still exist. The dragon still sleeps beneath the mountains of Cymru, waiting for those brave enough to remember. And remembering is the real magic. So let's watch a bonus video.
But it does seem that the fountainhead of the ancient Christian ethic was here. The order of which I may be the last member, by tradition, came into existence after the last great cataclysm or catastrophe which affected the world. Now, with these great and terrible impacts on the earth by great electrical storms being caught up in the tails of meteors or showers of meteorites, civilization as we know it was totally destroyed.
I've spent much of my working life exploring the controversial possibility of a forgotten episode in human prehistory, an advanced civilization of the Ice Age, as yet unrecognized by archaeologists, that collapsed and failed utterly during a global cataclysm some 12,000 years ago. When enough millennia have passed, and our descendants have invented civilization again after our fall into barbarism, I suspect they will look back on us with much the same ribald skepticism that we've been taught to view Atlantis. We will have become just a myth, just a story, mere pseudoscience, and certainly not true history.
All knowledge came within the ambit of the order, but they were particularly concerned with astronomy because they had experienced so many very significant calamities. And it was thought that a full knowledge of astronomy would enable them to predict conditions when these calamities were likely to take place and take some kind of action to protect themselves. If you look at the great megalithic complexes in Ireland, you'll see that what are described as passage graves are really bomb shelters of a very primitive kind. They are well above any tidal wave level, and they also afford protection from meteoric showers.
Several hundred myths concerning a global cataclysm and the loss of an advanced prehistoric civilization have come down to us from the remote past and from all parts of the world. These myths are eerily consistent on many points, and on one in particular. The cataclysm was not a random accident, we're told. We brought it upon ourselves by our own behavior. This may seem a nonsensical claim to those committed to the philosophy of scientific materialism, who see no cause and effect here, merely projection and fantasy on the part of the myth-makers. In summary, however, whether we react with scorn or choose to pay attention, the shared message of the myths is that our arrogance and our cruelty towards one another, our noise and strife, and the wickedness of our hearts angered the gods. We ceased to nurture spirit. We ceased to love and tend the earth, and no longer regarded the universe with reverent awe and wonder. Dazzled by our own success, we forgot how to carry our prosperity with moderation. So it was, Plato tells us, with the once generous and good citizens of the lost civilization of Atlantis, who in former times possessed a certain greatness of mind and treated the vagaries of fortune and one another with wisdom and forbearance, but who became swollen with overweening pride in their own achievements and fell into crass materialism, greed and violence. To the perceptive eye, the depth of their degeneration was clear enough, Plato writes, but to those whose judgment of true happiness is defective, they seemed, in their pursuit of unbridled ambition and power, to be at the height of their fame and fortune.
The story of Noah's Ark, a foundational narrative in the biblical tradition, tells of a great flood sent by God to cleanse the world of its wickedness, sparing only Noah, his family, and pairs of every animal species preserved in a massive ark. This account, deeply ingrained in Judeo-Christian culture, is not unique. Remarkably similar flood stories are found in the lore of diverse ancient civilizations worldwide. From the Epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia to the tales of Manu in Hindu mythology, these narratives share all the core elements: a cataclysmic flood, divine intervention, and the survival of a select few. This prevalence across distinct cultures raises intriguing questions about their origins and truths. Could these stories be disparate interpretations of a single, monumental historical event?
Predict earthly events. They participate in the cosmic dialogue between matter and spirit. And This dialogue, once fluent among our ancestors, awaits our renewed participation. The story of the Magi, often simplified in contemporary retellings, represents one of history's most profound intersections of astronomy, spirituality, and the transfer of ancient wisdom. To fully grasp what transpired after their arrival, we must first understand who these figures truly were and the vast body of knowledge they carried from the East. These were not merely astrologers in the modern sense, but custodians of a sophisticated astronomical science developed over millennia across Mesopotamia, Persia, and beyond. Archaeological evidence from Babylon and Uruk reveals clay tablets with detailed astronomical calculations dating back to the 8th century BCE. These tablets demonstrate not only observation of celestial bodies, but complex mathematical models predicting planetary movements with remarkable accuracy. The Magi inherited this astronomical tradition, refining it through generations of meticulous observation and calculation.
It was originally the task of each member of the order to be a compendium of all knowledge, all known knowledge. That was the reason for the long term of training. If humanity was totally wiped out, except for one individual, he should be capable of re-establishing everything from his own resources.
Whatever we call them, Magi, Druids, Naga, Apkallu, sages of Teotihuacan, Shining Ones, or Watchers. These were the sacred keepers who reappeared after each great cataclysm to reignite the flame of civilization. Found in myths from Sumer to Mesoamerica, from the Indus Valley to the British Isles, they are always described as bearded strangers, glowing teachers, or divine hybrids who bring knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, healing, and sacred law. Whether arriving by sea, descending from mountains, or emerging from hidden realms, their role is consistent: to restore order after chaos, rebuild the sacred connection between humanity and the cosmos, and leave behind systems, spiritual and scientific, that would become the roots of what we call civilization. Their names change, but their function remains: the reseeders of wisdom after the world is reset. These are the wizards of the ancient world. Please like the video if you haven't already. It really helps the algorithm to know what kind of things you like. Share where you think it's appropriate, especially to someone who you think needs to hear it. And don't forget to check out some of the wilder Pivot Point Wednesday shows. And last, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, especially if you want to break down complex concepts that make the esoteric not so teric, helping you on your journey to become your most authentic self. By subscribing, you'll join a community that thrives on curiosity and growth, and you'll never miss out on insights and some wild discussions. Let's uncover the universe together. Bye.